Hello, hello, hello! Welcome to What the Trans!
What the trans?
What the Trans indeed, Ashley. Yes, hello. My name's Michelle O'Toole.
And I'm Ashley Talbot.
And we're going to tell you all of the terrible things that have happened, all of the good things that have happened, and everything in between. Ashley, how are you doing?
I am alright, yes. I'm very tired in a lot of ways. And this is something that I know you and I have spoken of because it's part of our episode plan. Because there's been a lot of stuff going on in sort of micro and macro terms in life here in the UK, the Gender Recognition Act consultation, all the other fun and games. It's exhausting. It's all really, really tiring, and there's a bunch of other stuff going on in my life, and honestly, I just want to sleep. How about you?
Well, I woke up today at 5 in the evening, which should give you an impression of where I'm at. I just couldn't sleep the last 2 nights. Probably related to everything that's been going on, really.
Possibly.
But yeah.
Well, shall we get on with it then?
Yeah, let's get this over. Let's go through all of the stuff. So, what's first?
So, firstly, our first segment by tradition is Terrible News, and it's a very aptly named segment this week. Because in 11th hour breaking style news, and if we'd recorded this podcast when we intended to, we'd have missed this and wouldn't have spoken about it for another 2 weeks. But just yesterday, well, our focus is usually on issues facing trans people in the UK, but this story's quite a big one. According to a memo leaked to the New York Times, the Trump administration is preparing to define trans people out of legal existence. The memo outlines the administration's aim to define gender as either male or female, completely unchanged and based entirely on the genitals the person had at birth. It then stated that if there was any dispute as to a person's sex, it could only be clarified by genetic testing. So, there is a lot of cause for concern about this particular leak/announcement. This has rung a massive number of alarm bells for a lot of organisations all around the world, and particularly for the American transgender community, as this would effectively wipe out legal protections of trans people that already exist and obviously have massive implications in every part of their lives. Now, there's been a number of responses to this, which we'll get onto in a minute, but I think the key phrase, which was a phrase from the leaked memo, which was published in the New York Times, was this paragraph, which is, for the last year, the Department of Health and Human Services has privately argued that the term sex was never meant to include gender identity or even homosexuality, and that the lack of clarity allowed the Obama administration to wrongfully extend civil rights protections to people who should not have them. And that's really scary, because what they're saying is,
that's a hell of a sentence, isn't it?
It is, isn't it? Because that's basically saying, oh no, we did that wrong. Yeah, you guys, you thought you had equality. No, that was a mistake. But I'm fascinated by this because obviously the charge of this is being led by the Republican right, evangelical Christian, individuals who cause so much trouble for all sorts of people over in the United States and in other parts of the world too. Who are just so anti-science and anti-evidence, but as soon as they seize upon something that they could use as a tool of oppression, it's like, ooh, genetic testing, yes, we'll have that. I thought you didn't believe in genetics because God said, no, God says genetics is okay now. You know, and it's, this is all very terrifying, dispiriting. If you're listening to this from the USA, I am so sorry, my heart goes out to you. And, stay strong, I guess. Easy for me to say that.
One thing I think a lot of trans people in the US will be thinking right now is how when Trump was on the rise, before he won the election and maybe just before he got sworn in, they were probably telling their cis friends, he's going to do this exact thing. He's going to do this exact thing. This is the worst thing ever. Like, lots of minorities in the US have probably been talking to like people who are part of the majority, just like, alarm bells, fuck, Trump, fascism, hates me, And now it's happened. Like,
it's been happening for a while.
Yeah, I mean, it's been happening for a lot of people for a while, but it's like he's turned on to the trans community specifically now, and it's like, this is what people have been fucking saying for 2 years, for longer, for like 3 years.
Yeah. But there's a deliberateness to that strategy, isn't there? It's like, so there's been the Southern Poverty Law Center, who are, they sort of monitor hate groups in the US, are, they're sort of, there was a recent article about a conference at which the strategy of essentially divorcing the T from LGBT and using that as a wedge issue, specifically to kind of essentially divide and conquer the LGBT community, is specifically part of the strategy. So this is just, I don't know if we're on phase 2 or phase 27, I don't know, but the fact is, we, the trans women of the world, the Cassandras, have been warning about this exact thing for a long time. And it's not that first they came for that. No, this isn't even first, right? We're like 5 paragraphs into that poem now, and still it rumbles along. And this is, not good. Don't like it.
No, and now that Brett Kavanaugh's on the Supreme Court, there's a chance that if this happens, there'll be some kind of legal case somewhere. Maybe someone will sue for their right, a trans person, or maybe the ACLU, or any number of organisations to do this kind of thing. And then they'll get to the Supreme Court, and then they'll be like, no.
Yeah. Well, and
that'll be no civil rights for trans people in America for a good 20, 30 years. That's the worst case scenario. And I am especially good as a worst case scenario kind of person.
You very much are, but...
I've talked about this before. I have a pretty severe anxiety condition, which means that I am exceptionally good at seeking out the worst case scenario. Yes. And this is very much... I mean, this time, I don't think I'm entirely wrong.
No, you're not. And that's the problem, is that your worst case scenario is their strategy, unfortunately. And so, in a way, I don't know what to say about this. You kind of want to reach out and help. But honestly, I would say to trans people in the US who may be looking to get out, that's probably a good idea. Canada, New Zealand, Ireland. But honestly, the UK is a raging trash fire too at the moment, which we're going to come on to in a moment. So... maybe don't book that flight to London just yet. Come to Manchester instead. It's far more awesome. But I think let's boogie on to our next section. That's a terrifying story, but there's only so many times we can say that. Well, so moving on to sport, which is an area that we don't really cover all that much on this particular podcast, but trans woman Rachel McKinnon of South Carolina has won the world title at the UCI Masters Track Cycling Championships in Los Angeles. Hell yeah! Congratulations, well done. That's great.
Woohoo!
But of course, as what tends to happen when a trans athlete wins anything, the idiots and the nightmare people crawled out of their holes to declare that the competition is unfair because Rachel isn't a real quote-unquote blah blah transphobia, whatever, etc. And leading the charge on this was the racer who placed third in this race, Jennifer Wagner, who claimed that it was unfair, but McKinnon fought back by tweeting that Wagner had actually beaten her 11 times out of the 13 times that they've raced each other. And she went on to say, "This is what the double bind for trans women athletes looks like. When we win, it's because we're transgender and it's unfair. When we lose, no one notices, and it's because we're just not that good anyway. Even when it's literally the same racer. That's what transphobia looks like." So McKinnon also received support from the second place racer, who's Caroline van Herikhuizen. Who, when TERFs tweeted at her accusing McKinnon of cheating, she replied, "I totally disagree. No one is transgender to steal anyone's medal. We had an honest race under UCI rules. If you compete, you accept the rules. Otherwise, don't compete." So, yeah, lots of stuff around this, or rather, lots of reactions to this as ever, because there's lots of reactions to everything. That's what Twitter is for. But it's interesting to note that, to me it just sounds like sour grapes, right? Well, you lost. Suck it up, snowflake. Right?
Yeah, she pretty much laid it out right there. Did my mate Rachel. It's like if she didn't win, no one would have noticed. And the fascinating part of all this is the amount of transphobes who suddenly had a very intense interest into a relatively obscure cycling competition aimed at people aged 35 to 39. This wasn't the Tour de France, and then people are coming in, quoting, the guidelines of the UCI Cycling Championships, and it's just like, oh, you're only here because you hate trans people. That's the only reason you'd give a shit about this cycling competition, which none of you would have ever fucking heard of otherwise.
I wouldn't have done, honestly. But we, as McKinnon, our close buddy, mate, friend Rachel McKinnon, apparently, pointed out, is that it's just this constant double standard from the MMA fighter Fox Fallon, was it? And so that was kind of the first case in sport that I particularly noticed. I am not a particularly sporty person, I know. Hold your surprise, please, listeners. But we just, it just pop up this constant double standard of precisely what she has experienced, and it's really annoying, honestly. And but that's the thing is, Rachel, darling, you won. You did that. Woohoo! Woo! Victory! Onwards and upwards, although, not for Wagner, who was third. So she was just jealous, honestly. It just sounds like straight up jealousy to me.
Yeah, it's not even like if we did like just banish Rachel McKinnon off and say, no, you don't get the prize. She's fighting for silver.
Yeah.
The winner, like by turf rules, would have been Carolyn Van Herrick. Oh, for fuck's sake!
I know, it's a hard one, isn't it?
I'm so sorry, Carolyn, if you are listening, but you probably won't be because you're probably in Holland living your life and not listening to an obscure British trans politics podcast. But still, like, she would have been the winner. Like, I don't get what she's doing.
Yeah, but then, transphobes is as transphobe does. There's nothing else in their heads. It's just people lashing out at something they perceive as different. As always. So, yes, that is in fact all of the news stories that we have decided to cover for the top of the show, simply because there's going to be quite a lot of that sort of thing a little bit later on.
Yeah, as I was doing the notes for the show, like all of the news stories were basically what we're going to talk about in the hot take, so the hot take's going to be most of the show this time round.
Yeah.
But moving on, let's do some gender pop culture disorder, right?
That sounds splendid. What is our gender pop culture disorder this week?
It's actually quite positive. I mean, it's sort of, again, folded into like what we're going to be talking about in the hot take, but basically I'll start off with Butterfly. 2 episodes have now shown.
Mm-hmm.
The next episode will be out at 9 o'clock next Sunday on ITV. Butterfly, I've talked about this before. It's a show about a trans kid on ITV drama, all prestige and stuff. It stars Anna Friel as Vicky and Emmett J. Scanlon and Stephen. They are a couple, sort of estranged. They have kids. One of them, Maxine, is trans, and the show is all about them, sorting it out. And I don't want to spoil this because I want people to watch this show. If you've missed it already, you can get it on the ITV catch-up service, ITV Hub. And I'm not going to spoil anything, but what I will say is that sometimes it's hard to watch, but not in a way that's very similar to the movies that we watched, Ash. Like, it's not hard to watch as in you want to punch the person who wrote it.
Yes.
I mean, it's not perfect, but the scenes where Maxine is dealing with the dysphoria in very, very big, obvious ways in the show, like, it's not subtle. Okay, we're talking about a trans girl sitting in the bath literally screaming at her body, okay? It's not subtle, but it's also something that a lot of trans people can relate to. It's, as a show of a drama, it switches out where the tensions are coming from really smartly. Like, it's a different tension all the time. Like, 1 minute, you're worrying about, like, how the school will take it. The next thing, you're worrying about the dad. The next thing, you're worrying about, like, the healthcare situation and the gatekeeping. It keeps moving up where the tension of the show is. So it's not just all one thing. Like, that's the problem with a lot of trans things, is that it's all about one thing. Like, oh, will this person get surgery? Or, oh, will this person be accepted by the town they live in? It points a broad picture of all of the different things that can be terrifying for a trans kid and their family. The acting is on point. Callum Booth Ford, who plays Maxine, is incredible, and I don't know what Callum's situation is, whether they're trans or not. And to be honest, I don't know how they would have cast a trans person to play this role, because Callum is playing an 11-year-old. I mean, I wouldn't even know where to start with that, so I'm not going to touch it. I'm going to leave that to smarter minds to work out whether that's bad or not. But the only thing that really annoyed me, well, there are a few things that really annoyed me. The big one was where there's one scene where Anna Friel's character starts putting away all of Maxine's old boy toys, inverted commas.
Nice.
And she put away this big stack of PS4 games.
Oh, fuck off.
And I was like, what the shit?
Yeah, that's not going to happen. Jesus.
Yeah, like, had she ever met a trans woman before? Like, trans women and video gamers, the Venn diagram is practically a circle.
Pretty much.
Yeah, like, and it occasionally does silly things like that where it focuses on the stuff. I mean, the major focus of the discomfort with Maxine is definitely her body and the oncoming train that is puberty. But it does rely on these sort of shorthands where it's like, oh, she likes pink, oh, she likes nail varnish, blah, 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 and all that stuff. And I guess I see why that's there, and that is real for a lot of people, because, trans kids, they sort of cling on to whatever gender signifiers they can to try and align with their identity. But still, it's a bit like, there's more to it than that. But then it does portray it more as that, so maybe I'm just being, a bit sensitive.
There is only so much you can put into a 3-episode miniseries, to be perfectly honest, and they do want to get the point across, don't they? So, anyway, yes, carry on.
Yeah, again, I'm not going to do any spoilers, but after watching the second episode, the show is going places that I never thought it would. Like, I'm not going to say anything about what this is, but I was watching it, and this show is not fucking around. Like, gatekeeping comes up quite a bit, medical gatekeeping, And the end of the second episode made me actually, like, when it says the coming up next episode thing, I actually said out loud, Jesus Christ, because I had no idea it was going to go there. And I can't wait for the third episode. So I would say watch it. It's far better than I thought it ever would be.
Cool. Well, yes, that sounds good. I should absolutely watch the second episode. But yeah, because I remember we were talking about Butterfly quite a lot in the run up to it, and it has been. But the thing is, it's been received predictably, and what I mean by that is all the people that protested against it and said it shouldn't be shown and tried to start a petition and stuff, they have absolutely hated it, and all of the people that want to support trans people or even just learn a bit more about what being trans is have been watching it and saying really, really positive things about it. So, which is kind of what we expected, didn't we? So, but all power to it for doing that and having that reach and being made. And, you know, I've got to say, all power to ITV for actually doing this properly, consulting on it, talking to trans people, to trans youngsters, to their parents. Good. More of that, please, you know?
Yeah, mermaids, like, feature as a character, essentially. Like, they've got a mermaids group. You see the mermaids in the background.
I see.
Jake Graff, trans actor and activist extraordinaire, is in it for about 2 minutes, which I wasn't expecting, because I didn't hear anything from him saying he was going to be in it. He apparently just tweeted it on the night and said, I'm going to be in this for 2 minutes.
Fair enough.
And he was.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was, overall, I was pretty happy with it, which I was not expecting to say. I thought it was just going to be, like, I don't know, when somebody says to me ITV drama, I'm thinking like a tired police officer who drinks too much, trying to solve a murder in a small town that I don't care about. And this is very much not that. But anyway, moving on, because I'm doing that thing where I'm ranting again about how good something is.
You do that.
Okay.
And that's cool, but yeah.
Let's move it on. I've got nothing to rant about. Supergirl, season 4 has kicked off. You'll be able to catch it on Sky One on Mondays, I believe. 2 episodes are down. Basically, this season is sort of is doing a very, very not subtle anti-Trump thing.
Right.
Basically, there's a whole conflict in the show about how there's a rising anti-alien sentiment. There are aliens living amongst people. You know, the Martian Manhunter is in it. You know, things like that. The president was an alien, and they had to step down because she had to come out as an alien. And so,
well, I mean,
you have this scene.
Apart from anything else, surely that means that she wasn't born in the US. So, yeah, she shouldn't have.
That's exactly right. I mean, I'm not saying that's right. I'm saying that's exactly what the people in the show are saying. But anyway, and also that she's an alien, and aliens, like a lot of people, are quite scared of aliens because, in their defense, aliens do sometimes come to the planet to try and destroy it. Like in this show. So it's not entirely unreasonable, but they're still trying to make a sort of, progressives v. Republican type thing in the show where you've basically got Supergirl holding an American flag, standing in between 2 groups of protesters, screaming at them to talk to each other. It's just like, you're not being subtle.
Yeah.
And I know for a fact that at some point the replacement for this president is going to be a Donald Trump type. That's where they're going with the show. But anyway, the bit that everybody wants to talk about, Nia Nal, she's fantastic. Nicola Maines is playing the part really well. In the last episode, episode 2, she sort of comes out as trans as a reason for James, the owner of Catco, the people that publish the magazine and all that they, as an editorial stance, should come out in favour of alien equality. And she uses her transgender history to back that up, which is a very sweet scene, very nice, and made sense. It wasn't, like, the show isn't going to go for a whole, oh, she's trans, look at her internal struggle. If anything, it's going to be incidental to the character, and that's going to be great. Not really a lot showing her as a superhero yet, but I'm sure it'll be great, and the show is good. You should watch it anyway, regardless of the trans character or not. It's all crishy-crashy, bishy-boshy, fighty-fighty fun and goodness, so watch that.
Okay, I will. What's next?
Lastly, Tales of the City is a show that's coming to Netflix. It's apparently a continuation or sort of revival of a miniseries made by Channel 4 in the 90s, based on a series of novels by Armistead Maupin. Another name that I'll be butchering. Sorry, Armistead. The show has cast Daniela Vega from A Fantastic Woman and has Jen Richards from Her Story. They've been cast as characters in the new show. I don't know anything about it because I've never read the books. I've never seen the original thing. I couldn't find it anywhere. I don't know anything about it. I will update you as soon as more information comes out and I actually get informed on what the fuck I'm supposed to be talking about.
Nice. Good shout.
But yeah, it'll be out in 2019 at some point on Netflix, and I'll keep you updated on that.
Super. I mean, Tales of the City is like a classic piece of queer literature. which I have to confess, I haven't actually read it either. But somebody that I used to work with, actually, the person that introduced you and I, Michelle, spoke of it quite highly, and it is absolutely a classic. There was a miniseries. I seem to remember seeing a bit of that, but I was like a kid in 1993. I was 9 years old, so But yes, I'd be interested to see that simply because of all the other queer icons, really. Because Ellen Page is in it as well, isn't she?
Yeah, apparently she's playing Laura Linney's daughter. I don't know who Laura Linney was playing in it or what. I don't know anything about it. I should know more.
I mean, I'll be honest. Maybe this was one of the ones where it's like, well, if we don't know enough about it, maybe we shouldn't mention it. But yeah, here we are.
Well, I had to mention it because it's Daniela Vega.
Okay, fair enough. So we've mentioned
it's Jen Richards. There's going to be a show with them in it. I want people to know about this as early as possible so they can watch it.
That's a fair point.
I stand by my inclusion of this show.
I also stand by it because yes, you're absolutely right. Daniela Vega and Jen Richards, awesome performers and trans advocates both. So yes. Okay, and so, having finished with our gender pop culture disorder, it's time for us to move on to our very next segment, which is, of course, the hot take. Slightly different in tone this week, probably. Michelle?
Well, basically, as I was doing up all the notes and stuff for the news and all of that, I was noticing that all of the news seems to come under one heading, which is basically sort of everything related to the recent Gender Recognition Act consultation and how the trans community is so very tired. The last 4.5 months, I think it's been running for.
Since July.
It's been astonishingly heavy on people. The emotional impact of the national conversation around it has been draining, to say the least. And I guess that's what the hot take is today. Just trying to come to terms with what's happened, trying to figure out what the deal was and maybe how we should move forward. So, Ash, how are you doing with all this shit?
Yeah, I think tired's the word, isn't it? And I think so a lot of people that I know and speak to on Facebook and obviously I'm specifically talking about other trans people here, obviously. If there's any cis people listening to this, well done you for making it this far. But yeah, also speak up for us more. But we'll come back to that in a minute. Yeah, it's just this tiredness, this kind of seeing the anti-trans stories put out by the Times, by adverts in the Metro, by even in the Guardian, to see yourself and your identity and your sense of personhood constantly questioned and scrutinized and derided and written off as delusional. Just having that as the constant background, a constant drip, drip, drip of all this stuff going on. It's really tiring. And so we all try and support each other while this is taking place. We're all sort of, metaphorically holding hands and making each other cakes and spending time with each other and making sure everybody's okay. But it's not enough, because by the end of it, we're all so exhausted and we're trying to look after everybody else who is also exhausted, but we're all just so tired. All we really want to do is just collapse in a big trans heap on the floor and just cry for a bit while hugging until somebody feels better. It's bone deep, this tiredness. It's not like anything else I've ever particularly felt, because I've got a job, right? I've got to get up, I've got to go to work, I've got to work, 8 and a bit hours a day just doing other stuff, while at the same time all this other stuff is going on. Every time I pick up my phone, conversations at work, like, people say, oh, Ashley, have you seen? Yes, I've seen it, thank you. And the trick is, how do you move forward from this? Because at the time of recording, the consultation was delayed in closing from the 19th to the 22nd. We are recording this on the evening of the 22nd. So the Gender Recognition Act consultation ended but a few hours ago. And it's kind of like, what's next? It's also, I kind of wanted to be able to feel relieved by this point, but I don't. I'm not sure the press is finished having all of its mileage out of how much it hates trans people. And it's infuriating. Like, how is this even countenanced? Who on earth thought this was a good idea? So let's, essentially the forces of darkness are against us here, okay? And there are a lot of questions about a lot of the anti-trans groups that have popped up over the last few months. And where have they come from? Where have they sprung up so suddenly? And why are they so well resourced? For example, so we, I can't remember if we mentioned this on the last bi-week or not, but the organisation Fair Play for Women published an advert on the same day as World Mental Health Day on the 10th of October which was spinning the usual transphobic myths and bullshit about threat and desistance and so on, taking out a full-page advert in the Metro, a national newspaper here in the UK, costing somewhere on the order of £45,000. That was the initial figure. It could have been that they were discounted for having been disguised as a charitable concern, in which case it would have cost about £17,000, but that's still not exactly pocket change. So where are these people getting their money from? And the answer is, like, if you ask them, it's like, oh, well, it's crowdfunded. And, it's lots of people giving a few quid to support women's rights. And it's like, no, that's not what it is at all. Because if you actually look at the frequency donation, interestingly, the frequency and sort of the anonymous donations particularly, the anonymous donations are always the ones with the larger amounts, like, 500 quid being dropped in, and then the same donor dropping like £1,000 but a few minutes later, and it's like, who's doing that? Who's got 1,500 quid just loose there and then to spend to demonstrate how much you hate trans people?
Yeah, that doesn't fit in with the narrative of somebody, like people just giving a few quid here or there.
No. I mean, so they say, oh, it was crowdfunded, but it's like, certainly...
Who's your crowd? Who is this crowd? How they got so much money?
Yeah, like, what, who's donating 500 quid to this campaign? That's more than a few quid, guys. And it's... but admittedly, when something like this happens, there is usually a reaction against it, isn't there? So, for example, Stonewall, along with 108 other organisations, had its own full-page ad being fully supportive of the trans community on the 17th of October. But, some of the organisations that were on that, it's like, GCHQ, it's like, oh, right, okay, so it cares about the trans people that it spies on, does it? So there's a certain level of cynicism that I've got towards it, but I've got to admit that actually that was a nice counter to it. Well, okay, these people are going to take out a full-page advert in a national newspaper advertising how much they hate somebody. Let's get a bunch of other organisations to stand in solidarity, and I honestly can't fault that, and it was kind of sort of good to see, really. It's like, you do kind of wonder, why doesn't it seem like anybody has you back? And sometimes it does, people do, I think, but just doesn't feel like it's anywhere near enough. It's like, well, why aren't you doing this all the time? Why is this still a problem?
Well, no, I guess that, they're responding to what I would call exceptional circumstances. Like, because most of the time, the issues that face trans people are fairly unreportable. I say unreportable because they are important, but they're also what happens.
Mm.
Like, the news reports on the exceptional. It doesn't make a habit of reporting everything that's happening that people need to know. If it did, then there would be daily updates about how, on the front page, about how diabetes is one of the biggest killers in the UK, and not something on the front cover about, I don't know, Kardashians or something, you know what I mean?
Mm.
Like, if they are looking, they want to report on something exceptional, and most of the time, the suffering of the trans community is not exceptional.
No.
It's not necessarily an interesting thing. A far more interesting thing is a bunch of quote-unquote feminists saying that they are being bullied because, like, 18 trans people showed up outside a meeting somewhere. Like, that is an exceptional, interesting thing to read about, and that's the problem. Plus, the media, I think, has sort of an interest in keeping bullshit like this going because they're getting the clicks. Like,
oh, of course it does.
Like, I've worked in this kind of stuff before, and that's how it works. Like,
conflict creates clicks. Yeah, I know. I've heard it.
Yeah, and Gaystar News made the really good point that the Metro, by publishing the full-page transphobic ad and the full-page counter-transphobic ad, would have made somewhere between £20,000 and £80,000 off transphobia. Like, they cashed in, and that's what the media has been doing. They have been using groups like Fair Play for Women to cash in, and it's worked for them because, the national conversation has been about, are trans people legit? Are they going to open the door for rapists and girl guides? Are they going to do this? And people will want to watch, people will want to click, and then they're playing a game to sell the tickets for the game, and trans people are the ball. And it's been like this for years at various points. Like, about a year ago, before all of this, mermaids first hit the front pages and the top of the news websites, and people freaked out because, peddling the myth that there are trans people out there looking to inject hormones into your kid's arse, that gets people looking. Like, that's what they have been using the trans community for years now, and I've never seen it get this bad before. This has been exceptionally bad.
It's because it's been sustained, isn't it? And the reason it's being sustained is because, as you say, the media absolutely loves to perpetuate a narrative which denotes that there's conflict, and the way that that is done and the parameters of that discussion is something we will come on to in a little while. But the fact is that a lot of the mainstream media, these so-called journalists who are churning out this nonsense, are not doing some fairly basic journalistic rigor. They're not actually reporting things in an unbiased way. So, for example, there was a protest outside of the Daily Mail / Metro offices, because the two are owned by the same company, just for reference, where peaceful demonstrators who had a flare and some loud music was reported on Twitter as a violent mob, because trans people are always a mob, apparently, trying to stifle free speech, trying to silence the good people of Fair Play for Women. So yeah, on that subject, video shared on Twitter this week from Window of Truth that showed all the times Nick Williams from Fair Play for Women was talking about being silenced to a television journalist. And the interesting thing is, the full list of media interviews is listed on the Fair Play for Women website, which is listed 27 times the group's been given a platform. Yes, silenced, okay, whatever.
That's incredible that they can say that they've been silenced.
Hmm.
I mean, there is no way in hell, like, if you took, like, some of our most prominent activists, like Fox Fisher, or Owl, or, I don't know, Jake, or Helen Belcher, or Jane Fay, or any of them.
Any one of a bunch of people.
They wouldn't be able to reach 27 between them. You know, there's no way. And this is one person from one organisation. It's not counting people from Women's Players UK. It's not counting people from Christian Concern, who have definitely got some airtime on this. It's not anyone from Christian Voice or any of these other groups that have been coming out against this.
Yeah. And the unfortunate thing is that it's not just the groups that are coming out against this. So this, in our sort of new-ish, post-truth-ish world, is that actually the main thing isn't the news. The main thing is you just sort of creating content that causes a reaction. And so news is not now about the breaking story, it's about your comment. It's about opinion, essentially. And so different flavors of newspaper ostensibly have different flavors of opinion, although that does start to fall down when it comes to coverage of trans people. So just looking at it from the perspective of one single publication, The Times, right? And three names that just keep popping up on transphobia is Andrew Gilligan, Lucy Bannerman, and Janice Turner, who've been churning this stuff out on almost a daily basis. So, a quick selection from Gilligan's articles. GP guilty of running illegal sex change clinic, which was of course the story of Helen Weberly, which we covered 2 weeks ago. Girl Guide leader expelled for questioning trans policy. No, she was expelled because she refused to abide by an equality policy. Unisex changing rooms put women in danger. Trans activist bullies stop donations for Children Resource Pack, which was a reference to the Transgender Trend Resource, which was something else that was crowdfunded incredibly quickly, which was to be sent out to schools and essentially encourage the teachers to deny that trans people existed, discourage the children from transitioning. On no account should they, assist the child in cross-gender play, and also that cis and trans are unscientific language, which, again, if you know any sort of classical languages, that's just hilarious, frankly.
Yeah, the thing that needs to be said about Andrew Gilligan is he's a news correspondent, and his job isn't about opinion, he is about reporting. But as you can see then from his things, he reports from one side, and one side only.
Yes.
If he does, it's not clear in his articles, but he obviously makes an attempt to contact Helen Weberly, the GP. He very rarely tends to look out for other views on it. He will take the things and run with it because they sort of align with the narrative the paper has set up. And that's kind of his job in a way. You know, he's got to find things that are interesting and report on them in an interesting way. But the problem is, whereas with opinion people, they just pure opinion, they don't have to be held to an account as much as he would be necessarily. He's failing miserably at reporting what's actually happening.
He's not even bothering. Well, it would seem that none of these people are actually trying to find out what's happening, because it all just plays into what I'm assuming are their own prejudices. So let's move on then to Lucy Bannerman, right? Same publication. So she's written articles titled "Stonewall Backing Transgender Bullies," "Trans Movement Has Been Hijacked by Bullies and Trolls," and Father Ted writer Graham Linehan, who, let's remember, is not an innocent party in this themselves, says the trans activist Stephanie Hayden is a dangerous troll.
Now that one stood out to me especially because that's a Twitter spat.
Yeah.
What the fuck is the Times doing writing about a Twitter spat? I don't understand.
Scraping the barrel, that's what they're doing, certainly with their choice of editor and writer and stuff. Sorry.
Yeah, and Lucy Bannerman's sort of somewhere in between an opinion and a news correspondent, so she will basically sort of hop between the two. And that's in some ways quite dangerous because in some ways people can mistake her opinion pieces for a news item.
Exactly.
But like the worst one, I think, by far, Janice Turner,
Yes.
who's basically pure opinion.
Yes.
She's been around for the Times, and one of her recent ones was suicide should never be a political weapon, and she was saying that in response to Helen Belcher from various trans activist groups and various political things. Janice Turner and Helen Belcher were going to be on the panel of this award show. I don't know much about the award show or anything, but Helen Belcher pulled out because Janice Turner is famously transphobic.
Mm-hmm.
And Helen Belcher said that some of the coverage that Janice Turner has done may lead to suicides of trans people. And Janice Turner has responded that trans people shouldn't use suicide as a weapon. Now, my problem with that is trans people talking about a problem that faces us disproportionately and highlighting why that tends to happen. It's not about you, Janice. It's not about you. And fuck you for saying that. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah. So, I mean, she's come out with some real quality stuff, hasn't she?
Yeah, like one of the things, slip on a frock, chaps, and be a top 100 woman. Trans rapists are a danger in women's jails. Trans teenagers have become an experiment. I think the idea that she's not getting is that all of this, like, kind of coverage, all of this, is one, deeply unfair and journalistically unsound ethically, and secondly, contributes to minority stress. And if people who don't know, minority stress theory, it's basically been put together by a bunch of different scientific organisations. They've done like over 150 studies on this, and it's a well-tested theory. Basically, how it sums up is that being a minority means that you have more shit to deal with in life. And how they work it out in scientific language, it goes like this. Minority status leads to increased exposure to distal stressors. Then minority status leads to increased exposure to proximal stressors due to distal stressors. Minority individuals suffer adverse health outcomes which are caused by exposure to both of those stressors. And I don't know exactly what a distal and proximal stressor is.
Okay, for a start off, it's proximal. And
Oh, you with your words being correct.
well, I mean, like, it's literally written down right here in front of me on the notes. You're looking at the same notes. Anyway, so as the name suggests, distal proximal stresses. So distal stresses are things which might not necessarily have any kind of direct impact, any kind of direct stress, but because you're aware that they're taking place somewhere in your world, it's a thing that can stress you out distally. So, for example, the GRA consultation and its effect on you and me and everybody that we know over the last few weeks has been a distal stressor. Minority status leads to increased exposure to proximal stresses, which are things that are much closer to home. So if you're a minority status and you come out as gay and you're rejected by your family, or you find yourself being refused service because of, racism or whatever, that's a proximal stressor, which of course is exacerbated by all of the distal stresses, the kind of macro of society, which is exacerbating and making all of these things worse. So yes, minority stress, it is a thing. Do feel free to have a look at it. I'm sure that most of our audience is already deeply familiar with the concept.
But the thing that always happens with this is that whenever a minority brings this up, the majority freak out.
Oh, yes.
Like, you hear this when Munro Bergedorf said that all white people are racist, which is basically, I guess, an inelegant way of arguing that minority stress is due entirely down to, white people. And white people can be both of those different kinds of stresses at times, and therefore they are participating in racism. But white people freak out.
Oh, man.
They stop listening at the word racist and just immediately
I'm not a racist.
Try to ruin her life.
Me? I'm not. Yeah, no, exactly. And the thing is, like, it was an old Facebook post that some annoying little twat dug out off of Munro Bergdorf's timeline, where she actually made what I thought was quite a salient point about white supremacy and about racism and about the way that these structures are ingrained in society and exacerbate themselves, often without the individuals perpetuating these viewpoints and so on, realizing that they're doing so. And I thought it was quite well put, but everybody was losing their fucking minds over this. It was like, you can't say that all white people are racist. It's like, well, look, I'm a white person and I actually totally can say that because we are. We benefit from this structural stuff that we put here 200 years ago to keep everybody else subjugated. Bit of responsibility here, guys. Speaking of responsibility...
Yeah, and white guilt doesn't help anyone.
That's true.
Feeling bad about it isn't going to necessarily make it any better. Just take that in and try and do the best you can, Try not to add for it. Fucking donate money to Black Lives Matter. Just do something. That's all people would want. They don't want you to sit around thinking, oh, I'm a racist, oh God. It's just like, oh God, I'm a racist. I should do something about that.
Pretty much. Take action. But yeah, so getting slightly back onto our area of significantly more expertise, which is the trans stuff rather than the race stuff, speaking as we are as two fairly middle class white trans women at this point. So
I think we should call ourselves the whitest of trans women. Oh no, wait, we're definitely not that. The whitest of trans women are like Nazis, aren't they?
Yeah, it was like, Blair White and whatever. Anyway,
she's literally got it in her name.
Yeah. Can't really getting away from that one. But the point is, so you might ask, oh, why are you spending so much time attacking Times journalists? It's like, well, firstly, they've spent the last few months attacking me, so this is just basically a bit of revenge. But also, you also wonder, well, you think, well, it's the Times. Their editorial quality has gone significantly downhill over the previous few years. Who gives a shit what they say anyway? And that's a valid point, because there are other places, other sources of news, other publishers who we would have expected to have been a little bit more sympathetic. Specifically, The Guardian, who have, of course, published articles by Paris Lees, by Juno Dawson. I have been quoted in The Guardian once, very briefly, on a much longer article. But the point is, The Guardian have, not exactly consistently, but have been supportive of trans people's rights quite recently. However, The Guardian's view on this, which was published as an editorial entitled The Guardian View on the Gender Recognition Act, Where Rights Collide. Subheading, it should be possible to advance trans equality without harming the interests of women, but a toxic debate has made it harder. Okie dokie. Now, the problem is their whole view of this has been described by many people, including me, as bewildering and misinformed. And there are quite a lot of people who have criticised what The Guardian has actually written, the stance that they've taken. So Juno Dawson is the one who came up with bewildering and misinformed. Sean Fay, of course, and reasonably well-known but not trans writer Owen Jones was also among the first to criticise what the thing was. To criticise The Guardian's stance on this particular issue. So their stance was they call for a pause and reflection, which basically means not to do anything. But the really telling point here is where the statement, The Guardian rejects the idea that one of these positions is the right one and the other wrong. Important questions of personal identity are at stake, but also legal rights and protections. And it's like, okay, hello, The Guardian, if you're listening, I posit a counter theory, which is that actually one of these positions is the right one and the other is wrong. And yes, important questions of personal identity are at stake, but also legal rights and protections. I get that, but these two things are not mutually exclusive. The people who are suggesting that there are reasonable concerns about changing the Gender Recognition Act are the ones who are wrong. They are lying. They are lying to you, to the Times, to everybody. They don't care. They will just lie to get their agenda in print. And well done, you fucking swallowed it. So, yeah, I'm super disappointed in The Guardian. It's they were propagating the fear about streamlining the Gender Recognition Act for us, but what they're always talking about things which are already the fucking law. Right? If you at the point where you say, no, well, that's not good enough, we don't like trans people, so therefore we want to repeal the Equality Act of 2010, then be honest about it, frankly. Because the problem is no one will say that, because nobody wants to say, oh, we want to repeal the Equality Act, because then everybody starts saying, wait, what? Because when you start singling somebody out, any group, and saying that these people aren't worthy of equality, then obviously it stops being equality. And that is, of course, the idea for these things. So, yes, it's all really, really disappointing.
What I don't understand is, like, they think that cis women have a monopoly on sexual assault, and I guess, but then, and like, it isn't a thing that trans women have to think about. If anything, trans women are the people that will be doing it, and that's not true.
Yeah.
Like, and it's trans people in general, not just trans women, you know, sexual assault and rape affects pretty much everyone in the trans community. And if you want to be really insensitive about it, you go to Trans Pride and you say, hands up anyone here who's been affected by sexual assault or rape.
Everybody puts their hands up. I
guarantee you, at least 3/4 of the group of the people will put their hands up.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's assuming that is like the world's worst trans pride, if that happens at it. But you see my point.
I do, yes, is that the fact is a lot of us are affected by this too, which is something that's been completely written out of this whole discussion. And again, as we've said on previous pods, there have been like so many myths and misconceptions deliberately peddled by various people to try and make it out like this is about a reform of the Equality Act, and it's about trans people in public spaces and toilets and whatever. And it's not about that at all, and it never was, right? And so one bit from The Guardian, which again seems to be talking about the Equality Act and not anything else, is the end of the consultation ought to create a pause for reflection and a space for a more constructive exchange. And so someone pointed out on Twitter, so your bottom line is that the end of the consultation should create a pause for further consultation. When the consultation was launched, there were a lot of people who were quick to point out, you don't need to consult on this. You've already gathered the evidence, I don't know how many times, from the LGBT survey, from the Women and Equalities Committee meeting about trans rights back in 2016. There is no need to open this to any kind of public consultation. You have all of the information there that you could possibly need, but yet that is what they did. Out it goes to public consultation, and here we are. And people in the trans community are, well, I mean, I'm sick of talking about it. Are you sick of talking about it? This is all so stressful. It's a proximal stressor, I feel.
Yeah, and again, when Janice Turner says, oh, you shouldn't use suicide as a weapon, and other people have said that, like Helen Lewis from the New Statesman and Sarah Dieterman have famously kept saying, whenever trans people have tried to talk about suicide, they've always said that maybe we shouldn't. And what is the correct way for a minority to talk about an issue that affects them and to talk about the causes of it? Like, I know from personal experience that this kind of stuff does harm people's mental health. I've learned that through hard experience in my life. I have seen it happen, I have lived it, it is real, and I am not alone by a long stretch. Pretty much every trans person I ever meet has suffered the same thing at some point to various degrees.
Hello, yes.
Yes, everyone, pretty much. Like, I've talked to trans people from all across the spectrum, non-binary, trans men, gender fluid. I've talked to it feels like I've talked to pretty much everyone about this on my Facebook recently, and it's the same thing. This coverage, all of this stuff, it's like Andrew Solomon, the writer, he writes a lot about depression. He says that the opposite of depression isn't happiness, it's vitality. And for vitality, you need hope. And without hope, you're fucked. He didn't say the last bit about being fucked or anything. I said that. That was me.
That did sound
Andrew
like
Solomon doesn't say fuck. I say fuck. He does not. We're very, very different people, me and Andrew Solomon, but you should check out all his books. He's great. But anyway, the point being that this kind of endless coverage isn't exactly giving anyone any reason to think that the future for trans people is going to be good.
Mm.
And that hurts people. That's what people don't realise that this is about. This whole thing has just been a very public referendum on how people should see and treat trans people. And the voices that say that we shouldn't be respected, that we are dangerous, that we are going to open the doors for rapists and paedophiles to get at your kids, and we're going to start mutilating your child's genitals and all of this stuff. Those voices have been given prominence over the voices of trans people by a magnitude of like 50. And they're doing all that for money. That's what they're doing it for deep down.
Yeah, of course it is.
It's so sick.
Yes, it is. And so I'm sure some of them actually do despise trans people as much as their editorials suggest they would, but I'm sure some of them are just hacks, and I'm not sure which of those two things kind of bothers me more. But then, of course, as a trans woman, I'm legally bound almost to say the thing I'm about to say next, which is clearly the root cause of this problem is capitalism. So let's get rid of that, and we should solve. So I think that's
your answer to everything.
Yes, it is. All right, because it is the answer to everything.
When I ask you, oh Ash, I'm at a loss, I don't know what I should have for dinner, you say end capitalism.
Yeah. Ending capitalism is a delicious, sustaining meal, all right? I'm just saying you should try a little bit more experimentation in your cooking, a little bit, here and there. Like, I'm trying to think of a proletariat joke that is in some way involves food, and I just can't. I'm too tired. And this is the problem, is that I'm too tired to make puns. This whole thing has left me too tired to do the one thing that, as a trans person, I know I am automatically able to do, which is make puns. And I'm too tired to do that. This is No, I'm being extremely flippant there, but I am tired. We all are, and there's only so much of this stuff you can take before you actually just want to start really protesting outside of journalists' offices and saying, "Why aren't you doing some basic fucking fact checking? Why are you presenting these obvious lies if you claim to care so much about the truth and free speech?" I don't think you.
There are people out there who'll probably be thinking, well, they're just reporting on protests. How is that bad? And it's just that, like, to take example, there was a meeting for Women's Place UK in Bristol, and about 20 trans activists showed up, and allies, by the way, not all of them were trans, and they stood outside and they were chanting. And that was painted as a vile, scary mob, a potentially violent mob. Now, what is a violent mob? A violent mob is a mob who is intent on causing violence. A violent mob is the Proud Boys in America, or the EDL here, a group that is founded on violence. Nobody in their right mind could say trans activists or people interested in trans rights, their end goal is to fight and kill anyone. Their end goal is legal and societal equality. But when you start painting civil protest, just people with signs shouting stuff, as a violent mob, you are starting a precedent that is terrifying. Because anyone who protests could then be turned into a vile mob. And suddenly, protest becomes a dirty word.
Well, it already is for some, isn't it? And I think I've met trans and LGBT people who have taken that on and internalized it, in fact, and they want to be the respectable gay, the respectable trans person who doesn't talk about it all the time and is oppressed, but they wear it well and they're so quiet and dignified. And it's like, I reject that. I reject that so hard I could probably throw it into orbit.
Yeah, they're looking to save themselves. We're talking about the Debbie Haytons and the Miranda Yardleys and, the gender-critical transsexual group who, like, I've talked to them a fair bit, actually. I sort of went undercover on Twitter because I was bored and just trying to figure out how these people tick.
Yes, I was.
And across the board,
I was wondering if you were even going to tell this story, but yes, go on. This is a good one.
Well, I'm not going to go into too much detail or even say who I talked to, but across the board, their argument is very much that trans people are being too loud and asking for too much, and that has caused women, in their words, cis women, to start a backlash that will revoke the few rights that they had. Like, with one of them especially, her main point was that I was allowed in women's spaces as a sign of courtesy, but now trans people have made it too far that I am at risk of being kicked out of them. And so the reason why they were on the sides of these people was to basically say, I'm not like them, I'm one of the good ones, please leave me alone. Which is bullshit and stupid, because that never happens.
Yeah.
You either have to pick a side, and if you pick that side, they're going to come for you too. Like, that is where they're going. Like, with on Mumsnet, right? There was a thread within minutes of all that stuff about Trump wanting to legislate trans people out of existence. The title was, "Shit, I agree with Trump." That is the end goal of Fair Play for Women. That is the end goal of Women's Place UK. That is what they want, and they're not gonna make exceptions for these gender critical transsexuals out there who side with them. They're in with it too.
Yeah, so if you're a gender-critical transsexual who has thrown your lot in with some of these groups, they will come for you. They will come for us, and then they will come for you, and no one will try and stop them. So, think about that.
But anyway, it's not all been bad. I don't want to leave with people listening thinking that we are all fucked. We are not all fucked. There have been people stepping up. There have been. First and foremost, Nish Kumar on Question Time. Nish Kumar, the presenter of the MASH report, comedian, he came out heavily in favour for trans rights, even though I've never really heard him talk about it before. He's been sharing about it on Twitter. His show's really funny. He just seems like a genuinely lovely man. And just watching Question Time, where this trans woman, who's 65, I don't know her name. Nobody seems to know who this woman is. She gave this amazing speech about all the stuff she's overcome, and she got a round of applause from the audience of Question Time. And that gave me hope. We're not completely fucked. And there's been pretty a few things like that, haven't there?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think Emma Watson signalled her support with a T-shirt, and you can just imagine her saying, like, it's transgender, not transgender. Or, what? See, that's me making a Harry Potter joke, yeah? Like, savour the moment. But it's not just been it's not all been doom and gloom, but the doom and gloom has been extremely loud and shrieky. But there have been people and organisations showing their support. That second advert in the Metro, the one with over 100 organisations signalling their support, and all these just little things that can give you hope. And leaving it more or less on a high. There is hope for the future. The consultation is now over. What I believe the government is going to do is actually listen to the concerns of the trans community rather than its opponents. But you never know. We shall see. This is the Tories after all.
Either way, one thing that should be made clear is that if you're looking for somewhere safe to read online for news, I'm thinking Vice right now. Vice, Pink News, and Gay Star News are basically places that have been very, very outspoken about how they feel about trans people and very much on our side. And whilst
Vice particularly, and that really surprised me because they were absolutely going for it. Because, Vice has sort of been one thing, it's been another, it's had up and down, but obviously it did publish a bunch of articles by Paris Lee some years ago, and I was like, okay, I'll give Vice some time.
Including my favourite article of all time, which is the one she's talking about, TERFs, back when TERFs were just annoying people you had on Twitter back in 2014.
Innocent days.
But yeah, Vice stepped up.
They did.
And whilst they're not strictly a newsy thing or anything like, at this point, all the papers, except The Independent, which is barely a paper at this point, have been awful. So go to Vice, go to Pink News, go to Gay Star News. If you're really looking for proper LGBT news that isn't going to throw us under the bus, I think those are the only places right now that are doing it.
Certainly in the UK. But, we've got dragged back down into the depressing stuff again. But the point is, the consultation is over, and I do believe, I swear, I hope, I pray, I think that real change is coming. And when that real change comes, you'll be hearing about it here on What the Trans, where I no doubt we shall be announcing it with a delightfully salacious glint in our metaphorical eye. But finally, I think we do need to bring this to a close. And of course, Michelle, what is it this week for the Dickhead Dispatches?
Well, I think it's pretty obvious. The dickhead of this bye-week, and arguably the whole of 2018, has been the mainstream media in its entirety, of how it's been baiting a debate over the humanity of trans people and cashing in at every chance they get. There's nobody that isn't included in this. I'm talking the BBC, I'm talking ITV News, I'm talking the Guardian Group, the Daily Mail, the Daily Express, the Times, the Telegraph, all of them. They're complicit, they're awful, and thank God their readership numbers have halved in the space of 5 years. I cannot wait until they all die.
Amen to that. Bye-bye, guys. Your days are numbered.
And bye-bye goes any chance I have at a future in journalism.
Yes. Well, yeah, but what's more important? Doing that and churning out a load of shit about celebrities you hate for 10 hours a day, or doing something that actually matters and that you give a shit about and actually has an element of sort of truth and reality to it.
Yeah, I'm done with journalism. I've done journalism. I'm not doing that again. Anyway, who is the hero?
Well, we've got a few of them, several 100 million of them worldwide, probably about 100,000 in the UK. Our hero is collectively this week is us. It's you. It's your friends. It's the trans people. It's the trans women. It's the trans guys. It's the non-binary people, gender queer, gender femme, gender fuck, all of you. We see you. We know you're out there. We know you're real. We stand in solidarity with you now and always. We're so resilient as a community. We've already been through so much. We can go through this, and you never know, maybe one day we'll win. So this one's for you, everybody. And yes, slightly unusual tone to end the episode on there, I feel, but
yeah, this is very much not one of our usual episodes.
This is
not. It's not exactly been a usual time, has it?
No, it absolutely hasn't. But everybody, stick together, look after each other, look after yourselves. Self-care is important, and as always, we hope that love and compassion will win in the end. And I really hope it does. So, good night from me, and we'll speak to you in 2 weeks.